In the house here, it's Hnery Ross. And good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Good to be with you.
Can you hear me? Now you can hear me. Try it again.
Yes, sir. Good to be with you, Paul, here in Tupelo.
And clear and good to have you. Second bid for the seat. You lost it in 2010 Republican primary to Alan Nunley and running again. How's the second time around different than the first?
Well, the second time around, we don't have to pioneer the trail. We have a lot of supporters that know us, and they're ready to see us go to the U.S. House. We barely missed a runoff with Alan Nunley back in 2010, Paul. It was just over 700 votes to get in a runoff with him, and that was in 24 counties. So we came really close, and we're running hard again and have a lot of people that really want to see some change in Washington that are supporting us.
All right, and I noticed you had a list of things here as far as votes that were contrary to one of the things you're running on. What separates you, Hnery, from Alan? Because as an incumbent, perfect example, the vote yesterday or the vote Friday on the payroll taxes. And my understanding is you're telling me that Alan voted for that.
That's correct. He did.
You would have voted against?
I would have voted against it. 91 Republicans voted against the payroll tax cut, which is nothing more, Paul, than a payroll tax holiday that defunds Social Security retirements. And it's just left-wing stimulus. It adds $100 billion to the deficit. Alan Nunley voted for that. I would have voted against it. And this is what's happened in 2011. People's frustration, conservative frustration, boiled over when Barack Obama was elected and all these big government programs began to escalate and come into place. So in 2010, they turned to the Republicans to take the House back with the understanding they would reduce government, they would stop Obamacare, they would cut federal spending. That's what they campaigned on. They said they would cut $100 billion in federal spending. But when they got there in 2010, the House leadership began to compromise with Barack Obama and Hnery, and over again, they compromised to keep Obama's big government in place. They're going to spend more money this year than they did last year. They funded Obamacare. They funded Planned Parenthood. They funded all the Great Society programs that we've been frustrated with since the 60s. It's all in place. The federal debt ceiling was raised, $2.1 trillion. That's money that Barack Obama will be able to borrow and spend since August until this time next year, and add probably have a deficit or a national debt of over $16 trillion. In exchange for that, they got nothing for it, just promises of future spending growth reduction 5, 8, 10 years down the road. So everything's still in place. All Obama's agencies are there. They got absolutely nothing. All of these compromises were joined by and voted for by Alan Nunley. He voted for every one of these big government compromises the House leadership came up with. 59 Republicans voted against the April budget deal that they had. All that did was fund the federal government in fiscal year 11. All they cut was $352 million off of a $1.3 trillion deficit. 59 Republicans voted against it. Alan Nunley voted for it. In August, 66 Republicans voted against the debt ceiling increase. This should be of interest to your listeners. The entire Republican delegation in South Carolina, led by Jim DeMint, voted against that debt ceiling raise. The entire Republican delegation in Mississippi voted for the debt ceiling raise.
Why?
The same party.
Go back. Why?
Two different philosophies in the Republican Party. The South Carolina Republicans wanted to stop
And you're
this.
throwing a lot of numbers, and I appreciate that. At what point, when you're up there, of course, one of the things you're talking about, we don't need a career politician, but again, if you're staying in there more than one term, I guess you're a career politician. But at what point do you say, when you look at the stimulus bills and you look at this, that it's going to be injurious to the Republican Party, so what? You block it anyway and you take the hit at home, is basically what you're saying.
Right. You go ahead and take the hit for the country. That's what you do. This is an interesting thing. In the 1990s, Newt Gingrich and a different set of Republicans shut the government down to stop as much the spending that the Democrats wanted to do. Bill Clinton actually...
And he's being beat up for that now.
Well, let's just think about it in a minute. Bill Clinton vetoed that bill. He's really responsible for doing it. The Republicans got blamed. But what really happened? After they showed some determination and after they did what they did, we had 4 straight years of federal surpluses with more money coming in than going out. That hadn't happened probably since the 1920s. The economy boomed because they showed some discipline up there, and also they got a capital gains tax cut that Bill Clinton signed. Republicans kept the U.S. House and Senate for a decade after the shutdown. So they didn't pay any price there. And Bill Clinton got elected president, but he signed the Welfare Reform Act in 96. He'd moved to the right, and Bob Dole simply wasn't going to beat him. Yeah. So we didn't pay that price that people say we paid, but we did do some things to help the country.
Former Eupora mayor.
That's correct.
Got a little experience there, and of course, circuit court judge, and also a circuit court judge.
That's right. That's right.
When you look at your disagreements in the party primary running against a incumbent congressman, you probably are. That's where your major objection is, steadfast on some of these budgetary things, but on immigration, basically the same.
I'm sure Alan's against illegal immigration. Who's not? It's conservative. Abortion, I'm pro-life. We want to stop that. But one of the things I just mentioned, Paul, Planned Parenthood, out of all this, got funded, continued to be funded by the federal government. They could have stopped this if they really wanted to. Nothing can be spent in the U.S. House, in the federal government, unless the U.S. House agrees to do it. Nothing, not 1 cent.
But how much power do you have as a freshman to get this done, even in your second term? How much power do you have to influence that legislation?
Well, let's just say, look at the numbers again. 66 Republicans voted against the debt ceiling raise. 86 Republicans voted against this $1 trillion appropriations package that they passed in December. If that number went from 66 to 86, say up to 132, well, that would be a clear majority on the Republican side of the House of real conservatives, which is a majority of the House. Then you start electing the leadership. Then you start electing people who say, we will not compromise. Because when you're sitting there, you're either going to give in to the left, they're going to give in to you, or you're going to have to do something drastic to make things happen. That's what they did in the 90s.
And you know it because you served as mayor of Eupora. Some of those legislations, some of those bills have it all wrapped up in. You look at major universities in your district that are funded by this as far as research grants. Some of the cities, maybe Eupora, maybe Tupelo, maybe the areas that you are serving in, have some major funding in here. You said even if that's the case, you would vote against it.
Well, you got to keep in mind, we're borrowing $1.3 trillion we did last year from the Chinese and other people.
I'm also saying these are the hard decisions that have to be made.
These are the hard decisions, and everybody would have to share the pain. It wouldn't just come from one group or another. It would be across the board. Everyone would have to share in it.
So basically, when it is a budget bill, if it comes from the White House or if it's conducive to the White House thinkings, you probably would vote against it.
I would vote against it unless there were some real spending cuts that happen now, not in the future somewhere down the road, but right now. If we began to reduce the government now, I could support it.
I don't see how we turn it around unless we do, because even on this one, and I read the Krautheimer article a little bit earlier this morning on this additional stimulus bill, if you want to call it that, and he said it was like crack cocaine. A lot of people are not talking about this, but that money, as far as the payroll tax, that's the only thing that funds our Social Security, and we're digging a deeper hole there.
We're digging a much deeper hole.
About that.
And also it extended unemployment benefits until the end of the year. So we keep people at home, not working, not finding jobs. They say they require that, but do they really? I don't think they do. I think we need to stop all this left-wing stimulus in our government, shrink it. Yeah. And if we cut taxes too, Paul, I wanted to add this too. If we cut our federal income taxes to much lower rates, if we cut our federal corporate income tax rate, if we gutted these regulations, and these are things conservatives say, if we did these things and actually really cut the federal government back, we would have a booming economy. We would have revenues coming in to go back into surplus. But we have to do the whole program, not just the tax cut side of it.
If you had a vote on a perfect bill in your ways of thinking on energy, what would the Hnery Ross plan be?
The Hnery
Ross energy.
Well, the Hnery Ross plan would be to allow drilling for oil anywhere in the United States. We can't drill in the Arctic right now. They say they can. They're opening to leases, but Barack Obama, no president, Republican or Democrat, has opened that area up for drilling. We can't drill off the Pacific coast. We can't drill off most of the Atlantic coast. We can't drill in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. We can't get in the oil shale regions out west. All of that needs to be opened up completely for drilling. And if there are environmental concerns, the standard should be raised. They should have to show that there would be substantially likely an environmental impact. Otherwise, they can go ahead and do it. Congress can change that tomorrow if they want.
Isn't it as simple as if we can do it, environmentally safe, do it? It's really not much more complicated than that.
It's that easy.
The Keystone XL oil line, 20,000 possible jobs gone. Middle East tensions, looks like we are the highest in gasoline prices at this time of the year we've ever been. If any bombs start going on over there, plus the fact, over the weekend we were hearing some economists saying one of the reasons is not only this changing over to summer blends and things, we are exporting a majority of the stuff we get here overseas, which seems unbelievable. We don't have the refineries. We're getting a better price because we don't have enough money to spend on gas. We're cutting back, and this surplus is going overseas. So therefore, the shortage here. This is crazy.
It is crazy. And the XL pipeline deal, the payroll tax deal they had back in December, simply said to Barack Obama, you have to say no within 60 days instead of waiting to say no in, 1 year. What they should have required is him to say yes to the XL pipeline in order to get this left-wing stimulus.
We are almost out of time, but I wanted to say 22. I wanted to mention this to you. One of the big deals going on in Washington, D.C. is the contraceptive forcing faith communities, hospitals, to make a choice. Your thoughts on that?
That's another aspect of Obamacare, and really the federal government has no business in health care whatsoever. The Constitution, we're not even getting into that, Paul. The Constitution doesn't give the federal government authority to do most anything they're doing now. And they're in health care. There shouldn't be. We shouldn't have Obamacare, but we shouldn't have any health reach by the federal government in health care or anything else. Certainly they can't tell religious organizations that the employers have to offer contraceptives if they object to that on doctrinal grounds. The federal government has overreached now for beginning back in the 30s and certainly since the 60s on, and we don't have conservatives that go to Washington and say, hey, we don't have the authority to do these things, and we need to stop every bit of that. They say the conservative things, just like Alan Nunley does down here, Paul, and then they go to Washington and they compromise and they let every bit of it continue. That's what needs to stop.
Down to the wire, we will know. The primary will be voted on what day? What's the day of the primary election?
March the 13th, 3 weeks from tomorrow.
Jeez, that fast.
That fast.
Hnery, thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming by.
Enjoyed it. Good to be